This is where the painting happens. This is where I can kind of turn my brain off a little bit, get into a painting flow, and I know what everything is because I've already figured it out. I take these big shapes I've established and I start breaking them into smaller shapes, but I'm not deviating too far from the initial value. So if I know this whole thing was my darkest shadow, then this was a value 9, there might be bits that go a little bit darker to a value 10, and there might be parts that go a little bit lighter to a value 8. But I'm just breaking this into smaller shapes, but holding on to the initial value that I identified. And I'm doing that around the whole canvas with everything. And as I do this, I start to get into more detail, and I am able to get more expressive. I can decide where I want more information or less information, the way I want to express this piece as a painter, just through making decisions about how much information I'm going to convey and how far I want to go. As I move to later layers, I start using smaller and smaller brushes, and you'll eventually see me using my size 2 brush a lot. So I put away my Gamsol. I'm taking out my oil. This is going to be the only medium that I'm using. And where do I like to start? I like to start in an area where I think about 2 things. One is something that I'm excited about, but I also like to start in an area that I find to be important. I could also start in an area, I guess there's a third one. I could start in an area that I think is not working very well. That's like maybe it's bothering me. I think today I want to start with this whole edge. This is just something really beautiful about the way the cup comes around and the bird. And I know that this paper, I do need to adjust some things about it. So I'm gonna go there. I think over here, I need to make this back area of paper a little bit darker. My darkest light paint, which was this value 6 paint, and I've darkened it with some of this stuff. And remember, I don't want to go too far from what I've already established. So I'm making it darker, but if I go too far, it's going to start to read as a shadow. And I don't want that. But already I'm like, whew, that's so much better. What I just did is so much better than what I had. Sometimes it's just a few tweaks. That's nice. So that lays that down in the back. And this edge, I feel like this book kind of goes, it's kind of concave a little bit like that. Yeah, that's nice. I want to work a little bit on the book. And the book it's at its lightest point here. It goes lighter than a value 2. So I think it might be closer to a value 2 as it moves back in space. And then it goes a little bit lighter. So I'm going to push a little bit lighter paint. So it's not going to be a 0. It's probably going to be like maybe a 0.5 or a 0.75. Just a little adjustment just to give this edge right here a little bit more lightness as it comes forward. I think I had decided that the bird was lighter than the edge of the book. So I don't want to go so far with the book that the bird can't be lighter than the book. So that's about as light as I want to go here. I don't want to do anything more. And it is a little bit darker as it moves down, so I don't want to stay. Actually feel like I'm going to take some of that value 2 and push out something a little bit darker. So maybe I'm going to a 2.5 down here. So I'm breaking this shape up to give it more information about what is happening, and it's starting to feel more book-like. I might even push a little bit of this darker stuff right at the very edge back here, just to make it lay down as it goes back in space. And I don't want to work in any one area for too long. I do want to move around a lot. I could keep going right there, but I'm not going to. I kind of do want to work this out a little bit because this edge seems really important. And that paper, I know that paper goes darker there. I've got to represent that. It's not as dark as it is back here. It is lighter, but it's darker than what's there. It's a very subtle difference. Paper's a little bit reflective. So this is kind of like this darker thing that comes down here. And I do feel like I could actually push even darker back here. So let me try going just a little bit darker. That's too dark. I already knew it was too dark. I just put a little bit down and knew like that's not gonna work. Does that work? Yeah, that works. It's not too dark. Now I'm not worried about the value number so much as I mean, if it's going too far, then I might have a point where I need to stop and check my value on my value card. But in general, I've already laid the foundation, and now I'm using my eye to help me adjust. I want to come back and work my edge, the edge of my book. Push down a little bit. You see, I'm doing one brush stroke. Ooh, that one was a messy brush stroke, but I do one brush stroke and then I pick up more paint. And oftentimes we'll look in the mirror in between each brush stroke. The more confident that I feel, the thicker I allow my paint to be. So if I don't feel confident, I want my paint to be thin. There's this light spot that comes down there. I use my small brush momentarily just to adjust this edge. I want this to feel like a book edge. And I need a bit darker paint to pull it down. Fix that edge, and I'm gonna fix this edge. I think that looks good. So let me leave that part alone. I'm gonna go put a darker spot up here too, because there's an edge there that I want to be dark. So it's gonna lay that down. Okay, that looks good. So you see how I've taken basically these two shapes that I had already given an average value overall, and I started breaking those shapes down into smaller shapes. This was one big thing, and I pushed it a little bit darker back here, pushed a little bit lighter up here. I pushed this guy a little bit darker back here and allowed it to be a little bit lighter up here. And now I've created this sense of this light thing in light sitting on top of a darker flat surface that is also in light. Just seeing small little variations and small little adjustments in the values I've already determined. As soon as I'm getting something that's making sense, I stop myself and I allow myself to move somewhere else. So I'm going to move. I do want to get into this area pretty soon because I am excited about it. But because I'm thinking about this paper and I want this to read as paper, I'm gonna start to put in some of that shadow, the shadow side underneath the paper. It's about as dark as the darkest shadow in the whole painting. And if I can get that in already, already that little bit right there just created that feeling of this is a dark thing in light because I put this dark edge right here. And I think I need another one over here. Right here. So I'll just go ahead and finish this area because I wasn't totally sure about this. Actually felt like it needed to go lighter relative to this. And so I'm gonna go ahead and try that. It's still in shadow, so I'm pushing it lighter. It was my lightest shadow. And now I'm gonna be pushing it lighter than my darkest light. And so I'm not going too far though. I want to make it just a hair lighter because I know if I go too far, it starts to leave the shadow range. It starts to feel in light and then things get confusing to your eye, but it still feels like it's in shadow right now. So I'm good. I haven't gone too far. Let's see. It does get lighter over here as it gets closer to the light. So that feels okay. I want a little bit lighter. Still feeling in shadow there, and it's feeling, oh gosh, that's feeling so much better because now this feels like a lighter value thing in shadow next to a dark value thing in light. That's reading well to me, so I feel good about it. I'm going to allow it to continue to be a little bit darker over here. That's going to give it some of that dimension. These might be my final brush marks for this area. This is not an important area of the painting, so I might dink around a little bit with trying to get my brush marks the way I like them, in a way that is interesting to me. So that's what you see me doing. I'm just kind of trying different things with my brush. The paint is still fairly thin because this is not an important part of my composition and I don't want it to draw attention. That looks good to me. I like it. And so now I'm gonna work what this shape is. Okay, so now I know for this shape in the light, this is the cloth in the light over here. I know that it's a little bit darker right here than here. And it is right now, but I think right now it's a little too dark. So I wanna lighten it up. Not too much. I mean, again, we're not deviating too far from the initial decisions, but we do want to give more information. Let's get closer. Oh yeah, that looks good. I like it. Tempted to just leave it, but I do want this edge to feel a little bit rounded. So I'm going to mix a little bit more dark stuff in here, and I want this edge of this table to just feel soft. I don't want it to feel like a hard edge, because it's not a hard edge. It's a soft thing happening where it just kind of rounds. And that's pretty. So I can leave that. I feel really good about most of this. One little thing that I will do, just want to reestablish this little dark bit right here. So I kind of covered it up, but might be too much. I'll go back and forth a little bit. I know I'm just getting some details done because I might not come back to this. I like keeping it loose and a little bit gestural there. And I'm really itching to get up into this bird area. I think the first thing that I want to do is I want to work on getting the value in the negative space working. I think this was my middle light, value 3, but I initially felt like this was more a value 4. And so I do want to darken this side of the negative space. But when I look over at my setup, the light is actually hitting this back wall and creating a little bit more lightness here. So this is lighter. So I might just leave this and darken this side of the bird. I'm going to use a really big brush now, and I'm going to use a lot of paint. I had a value 3. I need to go darker. So I'm just mixing between piles, and I'm not even worried. Like I said, I'm not even worried about what value my paint is. I can test it by just putting a little bit down. That's too dark. Put a little bit down, and I just add a little bit more to it. And try again. Yeah, that's darker. It's not too much darker, but it's darker. Clearly a value shift darker. And I want to actually go and fill this in around the whole area, because I want to create that separation between, or the difference between this side and this side, and see how that makes space read. Just take my brush and move it all over the place, filling this in. Oops, I got some stuff sometimes I will do this just to see what is pretty. That, from a value perspective, is working a lot better. And also, I'm realizing just how much nicer this is relative to the front of this table. It needed that difference to feel accurate. So, and I didn't even realize that that was necessary, but it's very helpful. I do want to get this back wall thing to be the right angle, and that's something that I haven't yet gotten nailed down. Okay, focus about that. I'm going to work on the cup right there. So I'm looking at the difference of, now that I feel better about this value, this guy needs to go darker, at least in this spot right up next to the negative space. So that was my darkest light, which I think I had as a value 6. So I need to go a little bit darker than that. And let's see, if I do that, how does that feel? Does it feel right? Yeah, and it's okay to go darker here because I still know, I have in the back of my head that I'm going to be going a little bit darker there too. If I push it darker here, it creates that feeling just a little bit more. And as I move down to the bottom, it does feel lighter. So I had that darker area, but now I can go just a little bit lighter, make sure that I have this part lighter. There's some reflection happening. So I'm seeing, I'm going against what my brain is wanting to tell me because I know that there are these angled, I don't even know what to call them, but they're these octagonal, it's not an octagon, I don't think. The way that the surface kind of moves around is very planar. I guess maybe that's the word I'm looking for. And so the way that these pieces go across, my brain is wanting to say, oh, they're flat, they're each their own value. But they sort of are, but they also sort of aren't, because there's these reflections happening in the way that the light is hitting it, is creating some interesting stuff. So I want to follow what my eyes are seeing, not what my brain is wanting to see. And that's what I'm going to go for. I'm ignoring the highlight for now. So I've got my small brush out now. Gonna play a little bit with this top edge. And it's light up here, but I do want there to be room for some transition. And I'm seeing some areas of like, there's some darker areas and some lighter areas of detail. And this, I'm actually getting a little bit into the detail. And that's okay. I can do that in this phase of painting. And I can push between, I'm going to push between the light, this lightest spot, which is pretty light. It's not going to be my lightest, like it's not going to be as light as this. I'm not going to allow it to go there because this really feels like it's getting a lot more light on it than that. And so I want to maintain that hierarchy. Nice. It's pretty. So I'm just breaking up that shape right there. And as I get more information down, I can see better where I need to push and pull a little bit more. I can see more opportunities, more smaller shapes to play with. Yes, that was very helpful. Here's where I'm going a little bit darker. I'm now in that darkest shadow territory, and it gets real dark back here. So I'm gonna allow it to be real dark. Maybe even darker. Right here. I want to start to get this bird feeling like it's the right proportion again, because the proportions of it was struggling a little bit in my drawing. And I want to just make sure I have it where it sits on the cup. I want to make sure that that is at the right spot. That point where it touches. Okay, I feel good enough about that. The bird is lighter. I think the bird is lighter than what the value it currently is. Overall, I think it goes a little bit lighter. But I want to start to explore this edge of the cup. That feels nice. And the way that the cup comes around, because the cup, the relative size of the cup to the bird is really important. You need the top of the cup to be at the right place, and where it comes down, and where this darkest shadow, there's this dark thing back here. So I've got to get that cup relative to the bird working. And there's some light spots and some darker spots. And I'm using this really small brush because it's helping me get in there. It's allowing me to get some precision with my edges and everything. Now I'm realizing again that the top of this cup really wants to come up higher. Yeah, that feels better, better, better. Much better. Okay, that was too dark. I'm eventually going to get to the lightest light, the whole painting. But I'm just doing so by slowly pushing, separating these shapes little by little, and seeing just these little bits of nuance between the different values. A little bit darker here, a little bit lighter there. And I'm just looking at shapes. Smaller and smaller shapes as I go. This might be too light. That's too light. The soft edge here, softer. We wouldn't call it soft, but softer. Now I'm just doing what is going to feel pretty to me. To get my edge working right, and I want to get the values and the way that the values are coming together. Maybe a bigger brush just to get this brush stroke right here to be what I want it to be. I want it to look, even though I know, and you know now, that I'm working it a bit on that edge, but I don't want it to look like it's beautiful. Okay, I'm done with that part. I have to stop working it. Okay, had some technical difficulties there, but where was I? I was starting to work out this area, which our brain wants to overcomplicate. Our brain wants to paint a handle, but we have to tell our brain that we're just painting shapes and it's not so complicated. And we don't need to get all of the details either. Got to get some information in there. See that this thing, it comes out a little bit more, a bit more rounded. Each time I go back and look to look at my painting, I'm seeing what the previous brushstroke has done to give me more information. And I'm actually really liking the way this thing is looking. And it's not exactly what I'm seeing. It's kind of got this like interesting abstract quality to it. I think it's kind of pretty. So I don't want to go too much further with it. It's just little bits of stuff here and there. Little bits of little shapes, adjustments in value that are going to get the point across. Our eye does a lot to fill in the gaps in information. So if I can just give it some clues, then I don't need to keep going. I don't want to go too much further with it. There is an area back here that goes lighter. I like it. Now I just need to come around and make some sense of this cast shadow and edges. This cast shadow is actually lighter as it comes down here. But again, this is I have to decide how much I want to show this. it's really, really easy at this point to go too far. And by go too far, I mean like too far in any specific value direction that might not be, might make things confusing for the viewer. That point comes to the edge of the cup. And then the shadow begins right there. So sometimes it's not the thing, the shape that you're, or the object. Problem may not lie in the object that you're working on. It might lie something around the object that is influencing the way we see the object. We can take multiple rounds of pushing my edges back and forth before I feel like I've got it. This cast shadow that's moving back right here is tricky because it's right on that edge, and it's making it hard to distinguish between, okay, what is the top of the book versus what is cast shadow. So I have to make sure I'm really looking and I'm defining shapes the way that I'm seeing them, not the way my brain thinks it's seeing them. I need to get some idea of light in the cast shadow, because there's, well, outside the cast shadow actually, because there is light on the book as it goes back like that. That might be a little too light, but the handle has a little bit of this idea of shadow going back. But I need to make it seem as though there is some top of book happening. Top of book in the light though. There's only a little bit there, but it's there. And I need to show it a little bit. It's going to take a lot of tweaking. But here's the thing. This is not an important part of my composition, so I have to remember that. I have to keep reminding myself that I don't want to get too in the weeds here. So as soon as I create something that is good enough, then I want to stop. And that feels like it's getting too light right there. I think I need this value to push darker overall. There we go. That feels better. Okay, that's working now. Okay, now I have the back part of this book that cast shadow kind of like moves back, and I want to create a little bit of this idea that the book continues, because right now the book doesn't seem to continue back there. So something has to happen. It doesn't have to be much. And I don't know, there's some opportunities to make it what I think looks good. I don't have to be so true to reality if I want it to be a beautiful painting. It's like sometimes there's things that are weird in reality that maybe you could adjust in your painting. I do want the edge of this book to exist, but it really is a lost edge with the negative space back behind it. I'm choosing to make it just a little bit darker. I'm pushing my whole canvas, my whole composition out a little bit. And everything felt like it was just so close to the edge there. Yeah, so I've pushed my composition over. So I'm just giving myself some room. Not every edge needs to be figured out exactly. I would like for my brushwork to be nice, so I'm gonna like clean some stuff up in some places right here. And I'm just finding little spots where it And my brushwork maybe wasn't quite what I intended it to be. I'm going to put some little pops of detail in some places. So this book comes down on the table, and I want to make that edge just a little bit darker so that it feels like that's where the book is hitting the table. That's too dark. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go over it, put that down, it kind of lays things down, and then I can go back over it to redefine the edge on the book where it needs to be, and on the table actually. So the table I think I want to do something to this overall because it's feeling like, yeah, I'm mixing these together because I'm feeling like the book needed to be a little bit darker down there, and then the table edge actually goes lighter right here. Maybe not quite that light. It's really something more like that. Keep going with this idea that the book right there just gets darker and the table is lighter. Now we're talking. Okay, now I need to push this up just to be a little bit darker. Okay, I'm looking across the book. I'm trying to see, is there any other bits of detail that I could go and include? Now I'm doing these final bits of clarifying, cleaning up, anything that's popping out and feeling incorrect to me or it's bothering me. I'm going and fixing it. I am done with that part. I'm going to go and see what I can do for the title. Be too dark. I'd like to put something down to show that the book has title. think I'm going to put a little bit of title information back here. It just seems compositionally like it needs something. All right, two more little highlights. I've got to do a highlight on the edge right here. I mean, do I? I actually really love the way that looks. I think I'll just let this come all the way up. And I don't really need, and I could now put a little bit of a highlight there. Just right here. So that's too light. So it's very easy for a highlight to get too light. Okay, last little highlight. This is my lightest light. And it's happening right here. And this is the only place where I would even consider putting purely white paint. And that's that. Is there any other spot that I would plop a highlight maybe right here?